Thank you for the kind words and the good memory. That was a long time ago. Celebrating my 30th birthday at the time. He was kind enough not to mention what year it was, but I'll add that detail. So today, as you can see, the title of my talk is The Truth About Truth. A few people, since the talk was posted, have complimented me on the title. I have to admit, it's not my title. Sister Diane came up with the title, asked him whether it was okay. It sounds good, but then I realized I had to say something true, so here we are. I think the topic of truth is a big one, obviously. I'm going to focus a bit on the question you see here. What's distinctive about a Catholic university education? Or if we're here at a Catholic university searching for truth, presumably students at other universities are searching for truth as well. So what's unique or distinctive about how we search for truth at a Catholic university? And I'll be focusing particularly on Catholic education. We could talk about the Catholic identity of a university as it would affect student life and other decisions. I may say a bit about that, but I'll focus primarily on education at a Catholic university. And my general plan, you can see here, I'll go through these in more detail. I'll start with three false answers, or three answers that I think are misconceptions that someone might have about what Catholics believe should be going on in a Catholic university. So we'll start with those three false beliefs, and then I get to three answers that I think are not false, but they're incomplete. They won't go far enough, and I'll talk about some of the reasons why. So that's the plan. Hopefully along the way, I'll say something true so we can leave with a title that matches the talk. We'll see how that goes. Okay, I think one mistaken view, or one view that I think non-Catholics might hold, or might think that Catholics hold, would be to say that here at Ohio Dominican, we think that our job is to make every student Catholic, or that when a student leaves a Catholic university, that student should be Catholic, or else the education has somehow failed in some way. And I think that this view is a mistake for a few reasons. We'll talk about some of them here. One problem with this view is a practical one. I think if it's really our goal at Ohio Dominican to convert every student to Catholicism, and we advertise that goal, we're not going to have very many students. So having this view of a Catholic university education would require some sort of deception, or at least concealing our goal from prospective students. Of course, we welcome students of all different faiths or no faiths, and if it's our sort of unstated goal that we're going to try to make Catholics out of all of them no matter what, well, that's not something that we could advertise. So this first view would require some sort of deception, I think, or like I said, at least withholding our real purpose from what we advertise. That's one problem. Another problem, and I think this one might be more related to faculty members, in each course, if we treat that course as a tool of apologetics, or trying to make students into Catholics, it's going to distort different disciplines. Right? Learning about biology or accounting or even something like ancient philosophy is one thing. Learning about the Catholic faith and reasons to be Catholic would be something else. So I don't make this point to denigrate Catholic apologetics in any way. I think that there are Catholic apologists who do good work, but that's not our job in every class. Of course, you could have a class that is about Catholic apologetics, but that wouldn't describe every course. And trying to take courses in all these different disciplines and use them for apologetics, or use them to make converts, would distort different disciplines. So that's a second problem I would see with this view. A third problem is similar. Including me, most of us are not trained as Catholic theologians, or we're not trained as Catholic apologists. I would defer to my colleagues in theology. Dr. Parks is one of our best students. Our new colleague, Danny here, or Dr. Garland. They're trained in theology, and they've spent a long time studying the Catholic intellectual tradition, and I think they would agree that the work of doing that is never done, but they still have an expertise that I don't have. I think it would do a disservice to students if I presented myself as an expert in Catholic theology when I don't really have that expertise. I think we need to be careful as instructors. Of course, we can discuss topics that we're not experts in, but we should be careful to distinguish our role as an expert in some subject with somebody who'd be knowledgeable or interested in other areas. Of course, I can mention examples about biology and theology and math in class, but I try to be careful to do that as a non-expert, where I'm not saying as a mathematician or speaking as a theologian. So that's the first mistake, I think, to think that a Catholic university education is a kind of apologetics for Catholicism that would misrepresent what a Catholic university education should be, I think. So, second mistake. And this mistake, I think, is probably less serious, but I think some people would assume that at a Catholic university, somehow every single course has to be distinctively Catholic. And I think that that's a mistake as well for a few reasons that I'll talk about now. One problem is that there aren't Catholic teachings about some subjects. I don't think there's any such thing as Catholic accounting or Catholic biology. Even in my own discipline of philosophy, I don't think that there's particularly Catholic logic. You could have logicians who are Catholics, but there's really nothing that would be Catholic logic, or think about math, for example, like we're going to study Catholic calculus as opposed to secular calculus. Well, that doesn't really make any sense, right? These subjects are what they are: calculus, logic, take other subjects as well, computer programming, right? There's no Catholic computer programming versus secular computer programming. And in a course about computer programming, we should be learning about computer programming. A course about logic, we should be studying logic. So to think that every course would have to include Catholic teachings, again, it's going to distort the boundaries between different disciplines. Another problem, and I think people within the Catholic tradition might be more familiar with this problem, it's often not clear which teachings are Catholics. It's not as if all Catholics think the same thing about all issues. Of course, there's some basic principles of the faith, but there are many questions that are controversial, where Catholics disagree. Franciscans and Dominicans can disagree about different topics. Even Dominicans can disagree with each other, of course. So to say that every course is going to include some Catholic teaching, that's not going to be very useful, because it's not always going to be clear which teachings count as Catholic and which ones wouldn't. And then finally, I think another problem with this answer is that it really wouldn't make us distinctive, because you can learn about Catholic teachings at non-Catholic schools as well. Now, that might not actually happen, but I think that would be a weakness of an education if you went through the education and didn't learn anything or had no idea what Catholics believed. That might be surprising, but at many schools, you could be learning about Catholic teachings that wouldn't make the course distinctively Catholic, or wouldn't mean that the student leaves there with a Catholic university education. So again, I think saying that every course should include Catholic teachings, maybe not as serious a mistake as the first one, but I think that that's a mistake as well. Third mistake, and this picture might be hard to see for some people. It's throwing books out of a window. I don't really know what's going on here, but I was imagining this is the image for saying we're going to exclude any kind of teaching that isn't Catholic. I think sometimes people have this view that this is what Catholics would want to happen in a Catholic university. And again, this is a distorted view of a Catholic university education, I think, to say that at a Catholic university, we won't even mention any views that contradict Catholic teachings, or anything non-Catholic could never be discussed. And I should note, historically, I don't think that this was a view that people would hold at the University of Paris or in other places in history. You can read Aquinas and other people in the Middle Ages discussing Averroes, Avicenna, and other non-Catholics. So this has never been what people would think that a Catholic university education has to, or at least what people within the Catholic tradition think that a Catholic university education has to be. And I think it's a mistake for a few reasons. And I say this as someone who believes the Catholic teachings are true, but to say then that we're going to exclude discussion of all other teachings or anything that contradicts it is a mistake. Again, one problem would be it's not always clear which views would contradict Catholic teachings. One of the areas that I write about is ethics, and there's some controversy about whether certain teachings or things that people defend would contradict Catholic teachings or not. You can think about examples about the death penalty, for example. There's disputes about, or there is disagreement about what are Catholic teachings about capital punishment and other similar issues. So to say that we're going to exclude everything that contradicts Catholic teachings, there might be some examples of things that would clearly contradict Catholic teachings, but it's not always going to be so clear. The second answer, this might be the most fundamental problem, I think. I'd want my students to leave a Catholic university understanding non-Catholic teachings as well, or understanding what Catholics believe, but also understand views on the other side. That's not to say that we would think that no side is better than the other, or that there aren't any truths about these disputed points. I'll talk more about that issue later. But we do want our graduates to leave here understanding not only Catholic teachings, but understanding other common views as well. One thing I try to do in my class a lot is to emphasize that we have these questions where intelligent people disagree. If people disagree, they can be mistaken without being stupid or ill-willed. And we want to understand why people believe what they believe. And we wouldn't be able to do that if we excluded any teaching that contradicted Catholic views. Another problem that I have with this answer is that it's purely negative. Right? We're saying we're going to leave out anything that's non-Catholic. Okay, say that we do that, well, what do we do now? You know, what's left? If we get a view of what it is to be a Catholic university, or what makes a Catholic education distinctive, that's purely negative, it seems something's going to be lacking. Right? We can leave out all these other teachings, but then what do we do positively? What do we teach now that we've thrown everything else out? So, and again, I say that not thinking that we should throw everything else out, but even if we did have this view, we could do that and then still wonder what comes next. So I think that that's another mistake about what it would be distinctive about a Catholic university education. Okay, so those are three mistakes. These other answers I'm going to talk about, I think, wouldn't be simply mistakes, but they'd be incomplete answers, or they might be true in some way, but they don't go far enough. One answer you can see here that I think is incomplete is to say that at a Catholic university, masses and sacraments should be available. You can see the confessional here. I think that's true. I think it's really important at a Catholic university that we have masses available and other sacraments, or confession specifically, other sacraments too. But that's incomplete for a few reasons. First of all, I think that could be true at non-Catholic schools as well. If you go to Ohio State, you can still attend Mass and receive sacraments. I know I visited Case Western Reserve with my daughter last year. There's a church nearby. I don't think that having a Catholic church nearby would make the school Catholic. Or we don't want to say that whether a school is Catholic would be a matter of drawing property lines or something. I went to Marquette for grad school. There was a Catholic church there, of course, because Marquette is a Jesuit university. The church was a separate entity, or the parish was a separate entity from the church, but it was contiguous with campus. And we don't want to have the view that whether a school is Catholic or not would depend on how property lines are drawn or whether masses or sacraments are available. Because again, that could happen at Catholic and non-Catholic schools. So that's one problem. Another problem would be if students didn't attend Mass or receive the sacraments, then they would leave without a Catholic education. I think we're going to have to do something more if we're going to offer students distinctively Catholic education than make the Mass and sacraments available. Again, we should make them available, but there's got to be something more that would make an education here particularly Catholic. And like I said before, I'm focusing primarily on questions about education because that's my area. I think what's available outside of class is really important, but we're not really getting at what's happening in the classroom or what students are learning. I think if we're going to say what's distinctive about a Catholic university education, we're going to have to say something specifically about education, not just about campus life in general. Because we don't want to think, well, the education is the same as you would get anywhere else, but you can go downstairs and go to Mass in Salisbury, that's going to make it a Catholic education. Now, we'll have to say something about education specifically. So that's one incomplete answer. Another answer that I think is incomplete would be to say that at a Catholic school, we'll make sure that we don't disrespect the Catholic tradition. The picture here is one, I don't know if anybody recognizes it. This is Terrell Owens about to spike the football on the Cowboys logo while they pay for their 49ers. I see my colleague who recognizes it. I didn't want to have a picture of somebody actively disrespecting the Catholic tradition, like doing show some picture, something horrible that's going to go on the website. So I figured this would be safe to show. Now, again, I think it's true. I think we should all be respectful of the Catholic tradition here at Ohio Dominican, but a few problems with this answer. First of all, I think we also should be respectful of the Jewish traditions, Islamic tradition, Buddhist tradition, and so on. That wouldn't make us distinctively Catholic. In the classroom, you won't hear me, at least I hope I certainly wouldn't, or say something disrespectful about Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and so on. That's not to say that I would present myself as an expert about these other faiths, but we should respect all these other traditions as well. So that really wouldn't make us unique, because we should do that, not just for the Catholic tradition, we should do that regarding other traditions as well. And we could say vice versa. Again, this may not always happen, but I think it's true that at non-Catholic universities, people should speak respectfully about the Catholic tradition and other traditions as well. So just thinking in terms of what we're not going to do, like I won't or denigrate Catholic teachings, or I won't or say something insulting about Catholicism. Yeah, that's true, but it doesn't really make an education distinct in that sense. Also, I think again, what we say is going to be distinctive about an education at a Catholic university. We don't want it to be purely negative. Because, okay, so I'm in class, I'm not actively disrespecting the Catholic tradition, but what should I do? Right? Give me something positive that's going to make an education at a Catholic university distinctive, not just talk about what we don't do or what we won't say. So again, that's an answer. I think it's not wrong, but it's incomplete. And then third incomplete answer, and my colleagues know that I think that this is certainly true, that students should take theology courses, but I don't think that requiring students to take a certain number of theology courses is enough to say that the education here is distinctively Catholic, for a few reasons. First of all, you could learn about Catholic theology at a non-Catholic school. Maybe, I don't know what the curriculum is like at Ohio State or other universities, but it wouldn't be impossible to take a theology course at another school that's non-Catholic. Just that one course or two courses wouldn't make a whole education distinctively Catholic. Transfer students might transfer in here with credit from theology at another school. I wouldn't want to say that if you transfer into Ohio Dominican and don't complete theology courses here, that you haven't really gotten a Catholic education. Also, I say this as a philosopher, if this answer were all that it is, then I wouldn't have anything to do. At least I wouldn't have anything to do regarding the school's mission and identity as a Catholic university if simply saying that students have to take theology courses is enough to make an education here Catholic. Finally, I think whatever the answer is, it should be something open-ended. I say that in the sense, like, being a husband or a father, it's not something that I'm ever going to be done with. Like, would I check it off and say, okay, now I'm done. Now, you can have kids go off to college and leave home. I hope that happens. But that doesn't mean that I'm done as a father. Right? Being a father is open-ended. Or if I went to my wife and said, okay, what things do I have to check off to be a good husband? That would show that I don't really understand what being a good husband is. I don't say that as somebody who claims to know perfectly what a good husband is, but it has to be something more than just a checklist or just checking something off. And similarly, I would say, whatever is going to make a Catholic education distinctive, it can't just be a requirement that we check off or something that we do in our freshman year and that's out of the way, now we go on and do everything else. It's going to have to be something that's more open-ended, like being in better shape or eating a healthy diet, being a good father, being a good husband. Those are open-ended goals, and I think we want to understand Catholic university education as something open-ended. We can always do more to become more Catholic. We don't want to see our Catholic identity as an obstacle that we work around or a box that we check off. Okay, so those are some answers I wouldn't defend. I'm not the first person to talk about what's distinctive about a Catholic university educational course. You can read many things from within the Catholic tradition on this question. One famous document, Ex Corde Ecclesiae, by John Paul II, has an answer. You can see it here, saying that a Catholic university is distinguished by its free search for the whole truth about nature, man, and God. Now, I certainly think that this answer is true, but hopefully I can say some more, maybe to make this answer more specific, or you can still say, okay, if we agree, what exactly would that mean? As a teacher here at a Catholic university, what would a free search for the whole truth about nature, man, and God require me to do? Or as a student, what would it mean to be part of a free search for the whole truth about nature, man, and God? And I hope in the rest of the talk I'll be able to fill in this answer in some way. Not to say that I'm going to do better than John Paul II did, but try to be more specific. So for us here at Ohio Dominican, what would it take to say we're giving students a free search for the whole truth about nature, man, and God, or that we're part of that as students? I'm going to start with two obstacles. And you can call these obstacles or conversation stoppers, things that would get in the way of really having a free search for the truth. The first one, and my students will know that, we spent some time talking about this in class, depending on the class you take. You can hear it in different ways, but the word opinion is a real problem, I think, because it's used as a way to close off discussions or close off a search for truth instead of really learning more. You hear the phrase, that's just your opinion, or that's just an opinion, well, my opinion is this, your opinion is that. We use opinion in an unclear way, and I won't go through the whole class I teach where we talk about different definitions of fact versus opinion. To make a long story short, if you really try to nail down a definition of fact versus opinion, you're not going to find one. There's really no good way to define opinion in the way that people use it, because it can mean a few things. We can mean an opinion in the sense of just a preference, like I have opinions about how I like my steak cooked. The medium rare is the correct answer. But you can have other opinions too. Preferences about what to do or which football team you would root for. God forbid it's the Patriots, but some people would have that opinion. Or we can use opinion, sense like a doctor's opinions. In my opinion, the patient has cancer. Or in my opinion, this patient needs surgery. Well, those clearly aren't things that are just preferences, but the word opinion covers up that sort of distinction. So I would say one thing we want to avoid as students, but also as members of the faculty and teachers here, is dismissing views by saying, that's just your opinion. But instead of saying, that's just your opinion, we want to think, well, what are the reasons why you believe what you believe? It's not, okay, it's your opinion, sure, it's what you believe, but to say it's just an opinion with that word just, that suggests we're not really taking somebody seriously. I haven't seen the movie, I know it's from The Big Lebowski, but this sort of dismissive use of that's just your opinion, that's one big obstacle I see, and this comes up in class. When we are faced with a view that challenges what we believe, I think we might want to fall back on saying, well, that's just his opinion, or that's just her opinion. Instead of doing that, let's ask, what are the reasons he or she has for saying that, right? What's the evidence that the author gives for that view? And we can talk about whether it's good evidence or not. Another obstacle, and this one's a little bit more complicated. I would spend more time talking about it in my philosophy of religion course. So some of you may have heard this before, though. I don't think you took 224 with me, right? I don't know if I have any of my philosophy of religion students here. Similar to opinion, I think, is the word religion. And traditionally, religion would refer to the virtue of giving the praise that's due to God. Now we use religion in a different way. And again, I think if you look for a definition of how people use religion now, it's going to be hard to find a good one. I'm not the first one to notice this, of course. There's a philosopher I respect a lot named Alistair McIntyre. He's a Catholic philosopher, so he's saying this not as a good thing, but he points out, I won't read the whole quote, you can see it on the screen here, that people use religion as a kind of trash can. Right? These views that we don't really want to take seriously, we say, well, that's a religious belief, or that's just somebody's religion, and we lump together all these different sorts of beliefs, primitive animism, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, polytheism, Christian Science, and so on, and these different views don't really have anything in common. If you try to find a definition of religion that would fit all of these, or that would fit Christianity, Judaism, Islam, but also fit animism and Christian Science and Greco-Roman polytheism, it's really going to be hard to do. I won't go through all the different possible definitions now and criticize them, but you can think about it and see, when we say that's a religious belief or that's just somebody's religion, it's often used to dismiss that person's view. Right? We can put it in this box or a trash can of religion and then not really take it seriously. Like in an ethics class, we're reading what somebody says about a controversial issue. I think, well, he's a religious person, so that's why he says that. I don't have to take the argument seriously. Or on the other side, we might say, well, that person is non-religious or that person is atheist, so I'm not going to take it seriously if I'm a Catholic. Either one of those is a mistake. Again, we want to learn from other people who disagree with us, and I think the words opinion and religion are two really common obstacles to the free search for truth that John Paul II talks about. Okay, so better than that to say, well, that's just a religious belief or your belief is based on religion. Again, ask, why does somebody believe that? What are the premises that support this person's conclusion, and are those premises true? Or does that conclusion really follow from the person's premises? Those are good questions to ask instead of simply dismissing somebody's view as a religious belief or saying, well, it depends on religion, so I'm not going to take it seriously. Okay, so back to the question. If we get these obstacles out of the way, if we want to be part of a free search for the whole truth about nature, man, and God, what should we do? I'll finish up here by talking about a few things for one thing for teachers, and then some things for students and for everybody here at a Catholic university. One thing that I would say for teachers, and I hope that this answer is something that's not purely negative and it's also open-ended, we should be looking for ways to discuss the Catholic tradition in our class. And you can take the Catholic tradition very broadly to include not just people who write, but we can think about works of art and painting, sculpture, dance, and so on, song. I don't know a lot about art. That's my daughter's area, not mine. She's not looking to major in philosophy. But certainly we could learn more about that. And we want to be open to learning more. So as teachers, I think we want to not just say we're going to check off a box, like I'll cover Aquinas one day and that's it, but really look for ways that Catholic teachings could give us insights about the questions of the course. I noticed that we can do this even if we don't agree with the Catholic teachings. I would say, for example, if I were teaching at a Jewish university or a Protestant university, I could do the same thing. If I'm teaching at a Lutheran or a school, for example, I could look for ways that what Luther says is relevant to the course, or look for ways that Jewish teachings are relevant to the course, present those to students fairly without agreeing with them. I think that you can do this without agreeing with them. I think we should represent these teachings respectfully in the sense that we're going to present them as live options or as or things that are said by intelligent people that might be true, not just as a kind of curiosity or something to get out of the way. But this would be a positive and open-ended way to think about how we can make our education at Ohio Dominican distinctively Catholic. But my colleague, Dr. Stauffer, told me to use some particular examples here. I'll use some that would be familiar to me. You can imagine in your own disciplines what this answer might mean, and feel free to disagree when we get to the questions too, if you think that this answer is a bad answer. But I would say in a course about justice, we have the junior seminars about justice, or a course about ethics like the ones that I teach, it's not possible to cover every possible answer, right? The teacher's going to have to make some judgments about what answers we're going to take seriously in class and what answers we're just not going to have time for. Right? If I'm teaching some controversial question, I can't cover every possible answer. And I would say if I leave out what Hindus might say about the question or what the Jewish tradition might say about the question, that can be okay. Not that I would have to do that just because it's Hindu. Again, I think we can discuss Hindu, Islamic, Jewish views in a Catholic school as well. But I think we should make it a point that if we're teaching a course about justice or ethics, we should include something from the natural law tradition. That's a really important part of the Catholic intellectual tradition. And I think that should be taken seriously in any course here about justice or ethics. Again, not to say that students have to leave believing that it's true, but we should present this as a serious option when we're talking about these different questions. Another example, and I'll take this for my own discipline. When I teach ancient philosophy, obviously, ancient philosophy would be mostly Greek philosophy. When I teach the course, it's basically Plato and Aristotle. You could teach other Greek philosophers as well. But Greek philosophy comes before Christianity. So we're teaching a course in ancient philosophy. If we're reading Plato and Aristotle, we're not going to be reading Christian authors. So I think most of what I would do in a course about ancient philosophy could be done at any other school as well. You take a course in ancient philosophy at Ohio State, I hope that would be comparable to the course that I would teach here. But I do think it's important when it's relevant to point out how these ancient philosophers would agree or disagree with Catholic teachings. Like if we're studying Plato's views of the human being, particularly his dualistic view of the soul and body, I think we should point out to students that this view is not the one that's been widely accepted in the Catholic tradition. You might not have to point out that this view is consistent or inconsistent with different Islamic or Hindu views, but I think I should point out to students that this view is not the one that they will be learning about in their theology courses. And one reason why I think it's important that we do require theology courses is so these sorts of connections make sense. Right? If students have studied different views of the human person in other courses and then see Plato's view, well, now we can see how Plato's view is different from what Aquinas would teach or what other authors in the Catholic tradition would teach. So that's another example. And you can think in different disciplines about other examples. I would say, when relevant, we want to include Catholic teachings as much as we can. Now, I would add as a side note here, I'm talking particularly about being a Catholic university, not so much about being distinctively Dominican, but I think this answer could be adopted to say what's going to make education distinctively Dominican. I think at a Jesuit university, Franciscan university, Dominican university, the education should be fairly similar. Right? We don't want to think of the Dominican order as a kind of elitist group or something where we're going to only talk about Aquinas or only read Dominican authors. But when relevant, we should be talking about Aquinas or other Dominican authors. I would say at a Franciscan university, when relevant, you could be learning about Duns Scotus or other figures in the Franciscan tradition. So you could adopt this view to refer to what would make us particularly Dominican as well. For students, so here's some advice. And this, I guess, would be me preaching or get up on a soapbox here. You give me a microphone, so I have to give some advice. One of the most important things I would say is, don't assume that every course here at Ohio Dominican is meant to prepare you for a career. I hope that you'll get a great preparation for your careers here at Ohio Dominican. But that's not all that we're trying to do. And some of you have heard me say this before, but if you go into your philosophy class or English class, theology class, with the expectation that this class is supposed to make me a better computer programmer or make me a better accountant, you're bound to be disappointed because that's not what we're doing. Again, I want you to take great classes in accounting and all these other subjects, but not every course is designed to get you ready for a career. I would say be open to learning more than what you need for a career. There are technical schools where you can focus on a particular career, and that can be worthwhile. I'm not saying this to denigrate a kind of professional education, but we're doing something more at Ohio Dominican, and be open to that. Or don't dismiss something just because you see that it's not relevant for your career. We're not reading Plato and Aristotle because reading Plato and Aristotle is going to make you a better doctor or a better computer programmer. We think that we can learn from these authors, both from what they say that's true, also from the mistakes that they make as well. So that's one bit of advice. Also, I would say for students, I think for faculty members as well, when you see people disagreeing about a question, don't assume that the question has no answer. All these sorts of questions that are going to come up in a philosophy class are controversial questions. Or when you get to controversial questions in higher level courses, don't assume that because smart people disagree, there is no answer. I think one hallmark of an educated person, this would be true not just for a Catholic education, but I think it's particularly important here, you want to be able to think about questions where the right answer isn't obvious, or where intelligent people disagree. Sometimes I've heard this point put as, say, we want a tolerance for ambiguity. I don't like ambiguity at all, so I want to be as precise and exact as I can. My colleagues in philosophy know that we always try to not be ambiguous, make our terms and arguments really clear. But we want to have a tolerance, I think, not so much for ambiguity, but for discussing subjects where the right answer isn't obvious. Those are the really interesting questions sometimes, and we don't want to set them aside just because we see intelligent people disagree. So Plato says one thing, Aquinas says something else. Don't throw up your hands and think, well, there must not be an answer, or it must be that there's no way that we can know the answer because these intelligent people disagree. Think about who has better reasons for believing whatever he or she says. And finally, I would say for everyone, what we should do here at a Catholic school, and this would include Catholics and non-Catholics as well, we want to see the Catholic tradition not as some sort of obstacle or some kind of burden that we're going to work around, but see the Catholic tradition as a source of insights or source of truths. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with these teachings even, but I think we could say the same thing. If you're at a Jewish university, you want to see what can you learn from the Jewish tradition. Say here at a Catholic university, what can we learn from the Catholic tradition? We have all these authors, artists, they're saying different things. Learn as much as you can from the Catholic tradition. Don't see it as something that only religious people believe, or again, well, that's just their opinion, so I'll set it aside. We want to see what can I learn from what Aquinas and other authors in the Catholic tradition have said. If they're right about something, I can learn from that. If they've made a mistake, I can learn from that as well. And again, that's something I think that is open-ended, and it's something positive. We always can do more to learn from the Catholic tradition. We can do more to make ourselves open to learning what all these Catholic and particularly Dominican authors as well, I would say to make us distinctively Dominican, we can say the same sort of thing. We want to be open to learning from the Dominican tradition. I think since I came here in 2004, and you mentioned it, so it was a long time ago, I think I've learned a lot about the Dominican order and Dominican traditions, but it's not something that's ever going to be done. It's not like I can say, well, I've included Aquinas in my class, so that makes it Dominican, and that's it. No, there's always more that we can learn about being Catholic and Dominican. So, I'll stop there. Thank you.